Hello and welcome to Views on News. I am Jawad Tehami. There are a number of developments on the economic front. We'll be talking about the important presser by Finance Minister Mohammad Aurangzeb, in which he talked about Pakistan seeking debt reprofiling from friendly countries China, Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates to secure the IMF bailout package, saying, let me quote him, China will support Pakistan in securing approval of the IMF agreement, unquote. He also talked in that particular presser about Pakistan taking up the issue of reprofiling of the energy debt, conversion of the imported coal to local, also issuance of panda bonds to diversify Pakistan's funding source, also measures by the incumbent government in turning around the country's economy with a special focus on broadening the tax base. So these important aspects of the presser of the Finance Minister Mohammad Aurangzeb will be taking up for discussion. Besides that, we have seen Monetary Policy Committee of the State Bank of Pakistan has reduced key policy rate by 100 basis points, taking it to 19.5. Now, the statement by the governor of the State Bank of Pakistan says we have noted that inflation is on a declining trend. Also, KSE 100 index has gained nearly 800 points to close at 78,827.74 points today. In another major development, Fitch Ratings has upgraded Pakistan's long-term foreign currency issuer default rating to CCC plus from CCC, with the statement saying the upgrade reflects greater certainty over continued availability of external funding in context of Pakistan's staff level agreement with the International Monetary Fund, unquote. Let me quickly bring in our esteemed panel of guests to talk about these major developments on the economic front. In the studio, we are honored to have been joined by Dr. Manzoor Ahmad. He's member task force on FBR and tax reforms, former ambassador to the World Trade Organization. Dr. Ahmed, thank you very much for your time, for being with us on the show tonight. Really appreciate that. On Skype, we are honored to have been joined by Mr. Shikoh Atif. He's an economist. Mr. Atif, thank you very much for your time also, for being with us on the show tonight. Really appreciate that. Let's begin with you, Dr. Ahmed. Let's talk about this debt reprofiling. The finance minister has talked about saying Pakistan has now requested the maturity period of these loans, $5 billion from China, $4 billion from Saudi Arabia, and $3 billion from the United Arab Emirates to be extended to at least 3 years. First of all, if we try to simplify it for the understanding of the general public, how does this reprofiling actually works?
Well, Pakistan on average needs about, for the time being, for the next 3 years, maybe you can say about 25 billion each year. So once you strike this IMF deal, then IMF requires that somehow you try to meet this gap. So we will give some loan, but then you have to raise your own loan. So, and we for the last, I don't know, some years, we have had some 5-6 billion from Saudi Arabia, 3 billion from UAE, and similar from China as amount. So that normally every year we ask them to roll over, and so that IMF loan is conditioned to also getting this.
Okay.
And that's how we meet the requirement.
So why the IMF Extended Fund Facility Agreement with Pakistani authorities depends on the rollover of these?
Because they feel that whatever they are giving, so they are giving about 7 billion for the next 3 years or 37 months. So they think that this is not enough. And IMF, as you know, is a bank. So they want return of their money. So they think that if they give this money, perhaps it will not be enough to save Pakistan from default. So they want some other sources.
Right. Let me take Mr. Atif's point of view on this. Why this particular approval of the IMF bailout package for Pakistan by the executive board is dependent on these rollovers by the friendly nations, including China, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates?
So the IMF is actually looking at the viability of our, and I know you're going to talk a little bit later on about the tax program, about the tax regime and our ability to repay. and our ability to stay viable. So what China has done this time around is indicated a positive impression of our IMF program in their wordings in our communication with China. So what IMF was trying to do was to say, IMF has raised objections about us borrowing money and repaying China from them, but China has indicated that they are completely, so they have IMF has actually given a negative impression of our relationship with China. But China, as a reverse, has said, well done on to IMF, and they've given a positive outlook on this.
Let me take this point. Dr. Manzoor Ahmad, when the finance minister talks about China, Saudi Arabia and the UAE, which have always been very important partners in terms of meeting external financing requirements, what does that depict?
Oh, in general, they have been very, for example, the Chinese investment coming, but in this context, I think what you're saying is that, this funding gap that we have, and they've been helping, they've been keeping their money, 6 billion, 3 billion, and so each of these, UAE 3 billion, right. So keeping in the bank so that we don't go into, negative territory, and we have this, what we call, foreign exchange, at least 9 to 10 billion, so that if we go down, then our currency comes under a lot of pressure. So, yeah, that's what it is.
Right. So, when we talk about the conversion to the local coal, when we talk about those power plants, there's been a mention of, the Pakistani authorities talking or taking this particular issue of conversion of the imported coal to local coal. What sort of a significance that carry with itself?
Because Pakistan is highly dependent on energy imports. So almost our 1/3 of the total is, crude oil and such things. And then if you add on top of it imported coal, so we don't have that much of foreign exchange to that. So if we convert it, at least we'll be saving our foreign exchange. That is what it is.
But it will involve a number of things, including the technical support, finding solution to logistics and financial issues. So how's that going to be achieved? What could be the possible scenarios in that particular regard? That has also been mentioned by the finance minister.
You see, this was, we had known about this coal for a long time, but these were the problems because of which we could not convert and use it, and instead we were importing from South Africa and other countries. But I think in recent past, at least 2-3 years, we are already solved many of these problems. Maybe there's too much water in this or whatever, and that value, the heat value is not enough, etc. But I think they've overcome it, and now they're already using this coal.
So what sort of an impact, if that particular conversion happens, how bigger an impact it is going to have on the overall energy sector?
As I said, we have more than 1/3 of our total. If we are importing something, say, 60 billion something, so 20 to 25 billion goes in this import of only this. So we hardly are left with any other foreign exchange to import machinery or to import industrial raw materials or for other things. So if we are able to save that, then we'll have some, now foreign exchange reserves will be, they can stay at a certain level, comfortable level.
Right. Mr. Atif, when we talk about the conversion of imported coal to local coal, Pakistani authorities have taken up this issue with the Chinese also. And as per the statement by the finance minister, the Chinese have been very receptive to this particular. But he at the same time talks about finding the solutions when it comes to technical, logistic and financial issues. As per your understanding, first of all, how important is that conversion and what sort of benefit does it carry with itself? Or what sort of saving Pakistan can have on that particular front?
Unfortunately, the issue of imports in coal and elsewhere, the problem with Pakistan importing anything is not actually the import. And I know you raise a very good point. The quality is not that different, and quality is not that big an issue. Unfortunately, the Chinese are very sort of linear in their thinking. So if we agreed to something, they cannot understand and fathom that we are going back on our word. What are you saying? We can't import the coal, but we are like giving them options, and that's a good thing. The issue with importing coal right now is there are certain people in the process of importing coal, because Chinese are not used to under invoicing. There is a lot of under invoicing. There are people who, within the import sort of infrastructure, who facilitate the under invoicing of all of our imports, which is a tremendous burden on our. But when Chinese are involved, they become a little bit hesitant. So, because should we do it at the actual price of what we are importing the coal on? Should we under invoice it? What should we do? So there is a lot of lag therein.
Mr. Atif, now let's talk about this particular statement by Finance Minister when he talks about restructuring. Let me quote him that we are not asking for restructuring or haircut. Rather, our request is for extension in maturity periods. Unquote.
Yes.
What sense do you make out of it?
So what he's saying is
Reprofiling in three different forms. So it's not haircut. So it's just the extension in maturity periods. How do you elaborate on that?
Yes. So the maturity period, meaning if you had to pay something in 5 years' time, he's saying, can we pay it in 15 years' time? What that would do is, if you have to pay, like as an example, $100 a month, now you can pay $20 a month.
So that will naturally create more fiscal space, won't it?
Exactly right. Exactly right.
So Chinese being receptive to this, what does that depict when it comes to China's understanding of the problems that Pakistan is faced with on this particular front?
So China, we come up with these. They are receptive because they cannot afford for all of the infrastructure that was envisioned for CPEC and Chinese investment, all of that to go down, because they have, as they say, skin in the game as well. They are receptive, but as far as their financial institutions are concerned, there is a tremendous dis-ease. They're very uneasy with extending these terms and breaking the term of these terms from what was initially negotiated to 10-15 years, because even the macroeconomic outlook is not as stable in the long run. And they were looking very closely at the recent budget of Pakistan, but there have been certain alterations, and it was a good budget, but the certain alterations and the certain amendments that were made between the 12th of June and the 30th of June, they're very uncomfortable with that.
Right. Right, your point is well taken. Mr. Atif, I've taken your point. Dr. Ahmed, when we talk about this particular restructuring or haircut, that is not what is being sought by Pakistan, rather extension in the maturity periods. What does that mean to you?
Well, obviously, if the loan was maturing in the next 5 years, and if it's rescheduled to say 10 years, that's extension. So that's what they're asking. Instead of saying that, okay, if we have to return, say, $15 billion, and we say that, okay, give us some concession so that we don't have to give back all the 15, but maybe you get a haircut at much lower than the actual that we owe them. So, instead of say 15, we say, okay, just take 10 and that should be the end of it. So,
right.
Yeah.
So the fiscal space, a considerable fiscal space Pakistan gets as far as the situation on the economic front overall is concerned at the moment?
Yes, I mean, we had this experience after 9/11 when the Paris Club, etc., they did this rescheduling for a much longer term, 30 years. So we got this fiscal space because we didn't have to immediately return that money. That, you know.
Right. Let me take another participant on the
Yeah.
phone line. Dr. Vakar Ahmed, Joint Executive Director, Sustainable Development Policy Institute. Dr. Ahmed, thank you very much for your time, for being with us on the show tonight. Really appreciate that. When we talk about reprofiling, what does that basically mean, and how bigger a fiscal space currently it can provide Pakistan when Pakistani authorities are trying to implement some hard measures in order to stabilize the economy?
Yes, thank you. So in simple words, reprofiling would have two steps. One is that you request the lenders to extend the maturity of the debt which you have borrowed and probably try to remain at the same interest rate profile. Or if the lender wants to increase it, maybe increase it only marginally. That's one aspect. Second is that you try to negotiate that for the extended period or the grace period which they allow, no more stringent conditions are attached during the payback period. This is, of course, not an easy task, given that all lenders would like us to remain responsible in the medium to longer term. But over time, there are examples that Pakistan has undertaken reprofiling, and the donors have been considerate.
Right, Dr. Vakar Ahmed, when we talk about the idea of conversion of imported coal to local coal, which of course, as per the finance minister, requires the finding solutions to technical, logistics and financial issues, but Chinese being receptive to that, how important that particular conversion is and what sort of benefit does it carry with itself?
Yes. So the natural benefit that, for example, as a lay person, for the understanding of a lay person, the natural benefit is that you get to save a lot of foreign exchange that you're investing in imported coal that goes into your power plants. But more lately, during the past 2 weeks, we have seen that some new analysis has also come up which says that even exploiting the third coal or the local coal for these power plants would require imported technology. So whether the equation will be positive or not, whether the net effect will be positive or not, the jury is still out there.
So let me take this, Dr. Vakar Ahmed, if you stay with me, let me take this particular point to Dr. Ahmed. Even if we convert to the local, it requires a new technology. So,
well, I think they now have the technology, and so let's say I think they'll save about $800 million to $1 billion on the 3 power plants that they're initially trying to convert. That's the Hubco, Port Qasim, and Saiwar coal plant, because they were all high technology, etc., and they were all on imported coal. So if they use the local coal, so as I say, it's about this much saving in our foreign exchange instead of having to import it from far off places.
Right. Mr. Atif, do you have anything to add to this particular thing? Even if we convert from imported coal to local, it would require the new technology as per Dr. Vakar Ahmed.
Indeed, and the interest rate, the interest charges all across the world have gone up over the past 4 or 5 years. So any renegotiation, any at the newer cost, the cost of machinery has gone up tremendously since the past few years. So the cost, in my opinion, would come out to be the same if we invest in the machinery versus we stop importing the coal as it is.
Right. Let me go once again back to Dr. Vakar Ahmed. Dr. Vakar Ahmed, let's talk about the measures which are being put in by the authorities in Pakistan to turn around the economy, specifically focusing on broadening the tax base. During that important presser, the finance minister has talked about that also. It also talks about the simplification of the filing of the returns, also the digitization, also bringing in new sectors into this particular net. How do you look at the overall measures which are currently being taken by the authorities as far as broadening the tax base is concerned?
Thank you very much. So I think, as you have rightly pointed out, government's direction is probably going towards the right path, and which is why, of course, they have been able to secure the SLA with the fund as well. This is very much the kind of design of tax reform that funds wants to see. However, the fund is also cognizant of the fact that implementing what we have committed in this budget will be a stellar task going forward. So if you have seen some new measures, the taxation on the heightened taxation on the salaried class, the taxes on agriculture, the fact that we are now making life a bit more difficult for non-filers, all of these are going to have impact, which is going to create some pain for all stakeholders. There could be some, of course, in terms of wholesale and retail trade sector, there are negotiations still going on. Provinces are also being expected to raise additional revenues, so provincial governments are also being asked to look into their tax bases. But all in all, I think this is a step in the right direction. We may not get there in a year or two because there are some legal issues, and already many of the stakeholders, many sector associations have gone to the court after the budget. And of course, the courts would look at the legislators to give a much more stronger legal cover to the tax measures which have been announced in the budget.
Right, Dr. Vakar Ahmed, when we talk about the expansion or the expansion of the tax net or the broadening of the tax base, including undertaxed or untaxed sectors, for example, the retailers, real estate, builders and developers and agriculture, won't it naturally have an effect that would provide a relief to those people who have already been paying the taxes?
Yes, I think you're absolutely right that currently there's a few segments in the economy who continue to pay the taxes. They are the ones who are bearing a perpetual increase in tax rate every year. So any base broadening exercise is going to lower the burden on genuine taxpayers. And in the longer term, I think we need to lower burden for everyone so that we are in line with the peer economies. The reason that only few segments are paying taxes and we continue to sort of tax them is because many of the sectors go untaxed, which is why now across Central and South Asia, Pakistan has one of the highest income taxes, corporate taxes, indirect taxes, tariffs on imports. We really don't want this kind of an environment because it not only discourages your working age population, but it also discourages investment from abroad.
Right. Let me take this point to Dr. Manzoor Ahmad. Dr. Manzoor Ahmad, now broadening the tax base, going and identifying new sectors to bring those into the tax net, how big a relief it's going to provide to genuine taxpayers?
You see, if say I just take two sectors of economy which were previously not in the tax net, more or less they were very little contribution. That's agriculture, about 20% GDP. Then you have this retail and wholesalers, another 20%. So this 40% of the economy was kind of outside. So you get the rest of them putting up with their burden. And I think that's what is the government trying now this year with the provincial government, because agriculture tax is more provincial government. So they have set up considerable target for collecting tax from agriculture and from the retailer, etc., through these Taj-e-Do schemes and others, right. And many have registered. So,
Are there any measures that might be in the pipeline as far as the authorities providing a mechanism when it comes to reducing the burden, especially from the salaried class is concerned? Does this particular expansion of finding or identifying new sectors to be brought into the tax net is the only solution, or are there other mechanisms through which there could be a provision of relief to the salaried class in particular?
Well, I don't really see it immediately because they want to raise, from about 9.5% of GDP to already, 11, 12, and then take it to 15% in the next 3 years. So they want to bring in, and obviously if they can get this you see our grey economy is quite high. If they can get that into the regular economy, then I think there would be no need, these harsh measures will not be needed once they, more of it comes in through digitization and through all these measures that the government is taking for the
Right, Mr. Shikoh Atif, now expansion of the tax net, is that the only way by identifying and bringing in new sectors into the tax net, there could be a provision of relief to the genuine taxpayers, or are there any other measures that could be thought of also?
So it's a very good thing that they've started taxing the retailers and the exporters. This year, the tax burden on the retailers and the exporters is going to be 104 billion rupees. However, just the increase in the taxation of the salaried class between last year and this year is 111 billion rupees. So, unfortunately, the salaried class is so disproportionately taxed in Pakistan that, we leave behind the Scandinavian countries, and I am in Canada at the present moment. Salaried class is not taxed as heavily here as it is in Pakistan.
So what is the solution? What is the solution, Mr. Atif?
The first solution that comes to my mind is the government has to decrease its own unproductive expenses. And the finance minister talked about targeting 4 ministries within the 43 to eliminate the expenses in the government. But it is too late, too little. Because just in this budget, the increases to the parliamentarians' expenses, to the president's office, which has gone up by 60%, just the expenses all across the economy. But so good start, but that's where
by unproductive, do you mean those state-owned enterprises which are not generating any sort of a profit, or do you mean something else other than that?
Of course, those as well. And one good initiative that Pakistan proposed just now was the sovereign fund, that they said, the companies that are doing well in Pakistan will be marketed to UAE, and which unfortunately was shot down by IMF. But you say exactly the right thing. The state-owned enterprises, the unproductive expenses you mentioned. In this budget, the parliamentarians, each parliamentarian has been given a tremendous chunk of funds to spend within their own constituencies.
So you mean to say that the cut in the expenditure when it comes to the government functionaries, that is what you exactly mean? Do I understand you correctly on this?
One, that. Two, if the pain was shared all across, so if everyone was in it together, absolutely. But the parliamentarians, the expenditure on the parliament, the expenditure on the president's office, everything has gone up.
Right.
Within the budget from 30 to 60%. So the salaried person.
Please go ahead. Finish your thought, please. Complete your thought.
I just was saying that the salaried person sees all these increases in unproductive expenses, and he's like, why are you taxing me to spend money here when I don't benefit at all?
Right. Dr. Vakar Ahmed, now when the finance minister talks about right sizing of 5 ministries, that was in progress. So, but this particular step has been taken in order to cut those unproductive expenses that Mr. Shikoh Atif is talking about, but much more needs to be done in that particular regard. Do you think work in that particular direction will ultimately have some sort of relief for the salaried class?
Yes, thank you. So I think right sizing in the government should vacate some fiscal space which can then be diverted to PSDP, Public Sector Development Program, for which currently there is no sympathy if you, for example, talk about IMF. In fact, IMF talks about either further slashing it or freezing it. So, which means that any politically elected government hasn't got much space to expand the development side of the budget. But if you behave and you demonstrate that, look, I'm trying to cut my recurrent expenditures, I'm going to merge, consolidate ministries, departments, shut down some departments, then you're able to sort of demonstrate that I'm going to utilize this vacated fiscal space for development funding in infrastructure, in social sectors, human development, SDGs. So I think this is a good move. One just hopes that we move quickly towards it, because already you have seen that employee associations have started to knock the doors of the court. We are hearing this about PWD, maybe one more department. So I think the courts will also need to stand by the government if right-sizing has to stick.
Right, Dr. Manzoor Ahmad. Now, the expansion of the tax net, broadening of the tax base, digital data analytics. The Federal Board of Revenue has identified about 4.9 million income tax non-filers.
Yeah.
Isn't a considerable number of 4.9 million people identified who can pay the taxes?
Well, you see, the number of even those filers who file, they just file nil tax. But government finance minister just said that they have all the records, that, whether they have a vehicle, how often they have traveled abroad, or all the data. So, but they've so far failed to use it. For example, if they confront a person, look, this is your income, how much you're spending, so where is your income? So I think now their digitization, they should actually use it for this purpose. They have had it for many years, this data, but they were not effectively. What they did was they will send it to their field offices, look at that. But I think they have to have some, and that's what they're doing, for some central system where they can process it and use it to confront people, say that this is your income, can you deny it? So I think this will automatically bring in more people.
Right, Mr. Shikoh Atif, there is a development. The Fitch ratings has upgraded Pakistan's rating, saying in a statement that the upgrade reflects greater certainty over continued availability of external funding in the context of Pakistan's staff level agreement with the IMF. This upgrade in the rating, what does that depict?
Well, it's very positive to see triple C plus from triple C is very good. What they're seeing is, as a country, because they look at us from a macro perspective, they don't differentiate between salaried classes being taxed or this. They're like, okay, so now we have a source of income as a country, so become more viable. Whether it's disproportionate on this class of the society or that class of the society, which is not concerned with. So all this tax regimen, we are taxed most heavily in Pakistan, directly and indirectly, because these salaried people, everyone of us pays those indirect taxes, which is 18% on almost everything now, as you know. So Fitch has actually looked at it very positively, and they're like, okay, so now these people are responsibly gathering funds. I know Nathan Porter has said, because the government went back to IMF. Nathan Porter is the head of the IMF mission, for your audiences. So they went to him and they said, can we take some pressure off of salaried class and put it elsewhere? And this is what he said, unfortunately. He's like, unfortunately, do not trust in your systems to collect the taxes from anyone except for the salaried class. So Fitch rating, absolutely great idea, but my heart goes out to all of my salaried brothers and sisters who tax so heavily to get the rating.
Right. Dr. Vaqar Ahmed, there were a number of measures which were put in place by the authorities, especially under that standby arrangement with the IMF earlier also. This Fitch rating in its report also talks about those particular measures, raising the taxes, cutting the spending, and raised electricity and gas and petrol prices, eliminated the gap between interbank and parallel market exchange rates through a crackdown on the black market and regulation of the exchange houses also. So do you think all these measures put in by the authorities actually led to this upgrade of the rating by the Fitch?
Yes, I think you have put it probably in the most apt manner, that it was an amalgam of all of these measures. And also, I think that the favorable news that is coming from Beijing for backing Pakistan's case with the fund and the lenders, plus, of course, recent legislative measures that we are taking with the provincial governments when it comes to better or seamless coordination between federal and provincial budgets, the progress made towards improvement of boards and managements in state-owned enterprises, and, of course, a large number of steps which are being taken to satisfy fund as regards the power and gas sector. The only thing that I think the Fitch points towards is that we need to do a better task in communicating these changes to the citizens. There is, of course, possibility that higher levels of inflation would hurt more segments of the population. Islamabad has already seen back-to-back dharnas, and both of them had their, of course, resentment or discontent, of course, grounded in the high inflation which people are currently facing. So while all the measures that you have pointed out point towards fiscal prudence, they are, of course, our responsibility. We must take them, but the way they are designed, one would like to protect the poorest of the poor. In the energy sector, this means protecting the lifeline consumers. On the social safety net side, this means continuing to expand the budget for Benazir income support program so that social protection system remains intact and continues to really soften the impact on the poorest.
Right, there is a statement as far as the Monetary Policy Committee of the State Bank of Pakistan has reduced the key policy rate by 100 points, taking it to 19.5% now. The Governor State Bank, Mr. Mohammed Jameel Ahmed, saying that we have noted that the inflation is on a declining trend. So with this particular decrease in the key policy rate, it naturally depicts that the inflation is on a declining trend. What do you have to say about that, Dr. Vakar?
Yes, certainly. So on the back of massive demand compression, and we have seen demand fall down in almost all sectors, not only private consumption. So on the back of inflation, you have also seen prices fall for even non-food and non-oil items, which would, of course, carry lesser weight, but of course are important. So overall, you see that there is a downward trend. There is no room for complacency, of course, given that the economy overheats very quickly. We are still a large population, which means that any deviation from whatever fiscal measures we have taken would straight away result in higher levels of inflation. But I think one part of your question also, or I can take liberty to extend your question, that inflation coming down would actually give this government something to cheer about, number one. But it's also on this government that what it does with it. So again, there has to be a very good, somebody has to play that communications role where you tell that prices are finally stabilizing. You have seen some stability in rupee and dollar parity as well, which is good. So you have to utilize this stabilization to really give confidence back to the local and foreign investors who have been shying away.
Right, Dr. Ahmed, your last quick comment regarding as to what does this particular upgrade in the Fitch rating signify, and is it because of that staff level agreement between Pakistan and IMF already reached, or what sort of impact this is going to ultimately, this upgrade by Fitch is going to have on the executive board's approval of that particular IMF agreement?
Yes, that staff level agreement was one factor. But I think the Fitch rate, it's also because they think that Pakistan's economy is becoming more stable. It's not sliding as it was, it's becoming more stable. That the economy has some external funding available. So all these things combined, because that's why, I mean, on the other hand, you know, if the economy was, say, further going down, sliding, then they could have, lowered the rating.
Okay.
The fact that they upgraded.
Now they have upgraded this particular rating.
Yes.
Is it going to have any sort of effect on the IMF executive board's approval of the agreement?
Well, I think that was already done. That's more or less what was left there in IMF was that, we secured this funding from Saudi, rollover from Saudi, UAE and China. So that wasn't really linked with this.
Yeah.
But it has, because Pakistan is planning to float this panda bonds, etc. And if you have a very low rating, then you have to pay very high interest rate. And so that will help Pakistan in that.
Right, Dr. Manzoor Ahmad, member task force on FBR and tax reforms, former ambassador to World Trade Organization. Thank you very much for being with us on the show tonight. Really appreciate that. On Skype, we were joined by Mr. Shikoh Atif, Economist. Thank you very much for your time, Mr. Atif, also for being with us on the show. And on the phone line, Dr. Vakar Ahmed, Joint Executive Director, Sustainable Development Policy Institute. Dr. Ahmed, thank you very much for your time, also for being with us on the show tonight. Really appreciate that. With that, we come to the end of this episode. Till the next one, take good care of yourselves.